I don't know if you know. I don't know if you got caught up on any NFL news today, but Chase Claypool got traded to the Dolphins for Claypool in a 2025 seventh for a 2025 fifth.
Well, Chase, as crazy as it sounds, Chase's career might be done.
Yeah, but who knows?
It might just be starting with Mike McDaniel.
Maybe with McDaniel.
I mean, yeah, you do hear stuff like that. Like when receivers get traded, it revamps their career. But as of recent, I mean, I was watching Ocho Cinco and Shay talk about it. I mean, receivers now are built completely different. They are probably some of the most talented receivers. It's just they let it get to their heads. Chase Claypool should be a number one receiver in Pittsburgh right now, but he just couldn't wait his turn.
I thought he always had issues with his speed coming out of school. Like I remember him always being listed as like a wide receiver tight end out of Notre Dame.
They should have kept him as a tight end.
I think he could have been like how we're saying like Kyle Pitts last week is not utilized right. I feel like Claypool was kind of utilized wrongly in the other way, where it's like, yeah, he can be the 50-50 ball guy, but like we've seen with guys like Kelvin Benjamin, when you're a little too slow for it and struggle to take that separation, you're relying a little too much on the quarterback.
That is true.
Yeah, I feel like we're just seeing, like we're talking about Justin Fields now kind of become a guy who might make his receivers look better. I think still it's the other way around. His receivers are making him look better. Like DJ Moore really, I think, got the best out of Justin Fields. I think that's something that we're going to see better out of. And I don't think Chase Claypool is just in a point where he makes quarterbacks better. So, maybe Miami's in a different point. They can use him in the right situations, maybe in more short yardage 50-50 situations, which I think he would be better suited for. But
yeah, I like that fit just because he doesn't have to be that main target or a second target. He literally could, like you said, I think this might be one of his first times since the Steelers actually being a third target, like a third option. An offense, fourth option.
I still think that Miami does need a big body receiver, especially in the red zone.
Is now on IR, and he was kind of filling that big body slot over the middle of the field guy for Miami. I feel like, this could be a good fit.
Yeah, the little trade talk, pre-trade talk is always a little good conversation breaker, icebreaker. But, I mean, Chase, I feel like Chase 5 years ago, if he came into the NFL, he would thrive a lot more, though. Just because we're in that utility guy era. Like, we're seeing guys that are 6'4" line up with receivers that are literally our height. And those receivers have potential to be number one receiver. Like, I mean, look at the Dolphins. I'm pretty sure the Dolphins receiver room is one of the shortest and fastest. Now with the now with acquiring Chase, that clearly changes it up a little bit. But I mean, that's just a prime example that came off the top of my head. They just so happened traded for Chase.
I think they're just trying to get the most firepower they can get on offense. They're probably that's what they want to do. Someone that could just go up there and just make a play. That's what I think. That's what they really need. Just a big body receiver.
I feel like that those skill positions are turning more into more college team-esque, like where we have a bunch of stars and we're just gonna rotate door them. Whatever 3 or 4 are hot are the ones that are gonna hot touch the field, and then from there on we're just gonna go and go and go.
I think we really are seeing like a different era come in because like. Also, I know they lost, and I know that it wasn't like a pretty showing, but when that Washington offense looked good last night, and like, when Sammy Sosa was slinging it, I felt like, we were seeing like a lot of former running backs kind of get available as receivers. Yeah, Terry McLaurin's been a receiver since Ohio State, but Curtis Samuel was a running back at Ohio State. We saw Antonio Gibson be used out wide, and he had a 28-yard catch where he kind of slipped free down the sideline. He had a play where he kind of looked like DJ Moore did on one of his first big yards after catch plays where he made one guy miss and got out downfield. I think that's the direction that wide receivers are kind of heading in, like more of those skill position guys that can make guys miss and kind of finesse their way down the field. Not saying that big body receivers aren't still useful, but they actually have to adapt too. They kind of have to become more technicians than they've ever had to be. I think that worked against Claypool, for example.
Yeah,
And
actually.
Antonio Gibson was also a wide receiver in Memphis in college.
I thought
So
he
he
was a
knows. He
running
knows.
back. I thought he was a receiving back. Oh shit.
He at first he started as a wide receiver in college. And then they transitioned him to a running back.
Okay.
Yeah, and going back to what you said, Curtis Samuel in high school, I believe, was like a 4.5 or 3.5 star running back
Yeah, I remember
going
him
into Ohio
specifically
State.
being Ohio State. Like, what was it? He wore like number 28 there. He was like a pure running back.
Hmm.
I thought he was going to be drafted to be a running back in the league. And during
Yeah,
his time
but
with the Panthers, he kind of switched over to a slot receiver type.
yeah, we drafted him as a utility, literally as a utility guy. Come draft down, I'm pretty sure we didn't even announce him as a running back. We drafted him as a utility guy. I feel like that's kind of when the league started shifting. Some teams, but I want to say completely shifting about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where we saw guys get drafted. Like this is what I think of. I think of a Tavon Austin where if he came out around now, or even like I said 4 years ago, he would probably have a 10 to 12 year career
Oh yeah,
compared to how we have him now.
guys like
Because
Tutu Atwell and
first,
then Rondale Moore, like kind of succeeding and finding success. I think that kind of proves your point.
yeah, I'm not saying Tavon was going to be a first round pick or a bona fide like top three pick, day one pick. Shit, he could have been a day three pick, but he still would have found his way in a Sean McVay offense, found his way in I mean, even yeah, like you said, at Tutu, he would have found his way into Sean McVay offense, and imagine him to line up in a slot with three number one receivers
Yeah, I mean,
Oh
Tavon
yeah.
Austin
compared
was
to him
literally a
getting.
Ram. So if you push his draft date back 10 years, let's say he's just joining the Rams offense now, like replace him with Tutu, where I think we are seeing, like, him be a generational prospect because that's the type of guy Tavon Austin was. I think a lot of players
Yeah,
actually from West Virginia, Pat White was another example that I think if he came out at a different time, he would have balled out.
I mean, we could go back draft class to draft class and do this every single year, but I really think that we're in a point of a like league where we're gonna see a lot more athletic guys, not necessarily those freak of athletic guys like those 6'3", 6'2". We're gonna obviously see them more and more, but I feel like we're gonna see those 6 foot, 6'1", those 5'11", 5'10" running wide receivers and running backs come out. The Jared McKissicks that in high school started up as a quarterback, went out there, played wide receiver, went out there, played running back, and now is finding himself in a role where we don't even know how he's going to get paid. Taysom Hill is another one. I mean, the league is turning into like a college-esque, and with teams putting up 70 points, teams putting up 40 points, quarterbacks that aren't used to throwing multiple touchdowns in games, now throwing four back to back. It's kind of, I mean, I don't know. I might just be like on some hating old head, whatever, but I kind of like it. I really like how the offenses are starting to. We're not waiting 5 minutes for a touchdown. We're not waiting every 30 minutes for a touchdown. Now, every 3 minutes, we're seeing scores. I like
Right.
it.
Yeah, no, I think to your point and almost against your point at the very end there, I think over the past few years we've seen situational football kind of be utilized more and like, coaches get the best out of like players like Taysom Hill, players like, I know he's not been producing this year, but Hunter Renfro, where it's like not necessarily like
Mm-hmm.
the typical athlete, but they know the strength, they know how to utilize him. And also kind of against your point, I think that like scoring, I feel like we've seen it like drop off for the most part of like the last few years. I think we've seen red zone defense get better and like red zone like stops kind of become besides the tush push, red zone
Mm-hmm.
stops become kind of the
Brotherly
norm.
push.
What was that?
The brotherly push. That's what Philly calls it. The brotherly push.
The brotherly push. But yeah, I think that like situational football is kind of adapted to like where we are seeing like analytics and stuff like that. Like the McDaniels, the McVays kind of take over and shape the league in their way. And it looks very different than it did like, a few years ago, even when we were growing up. And it feels weird to say that because like, we've really just seen like a good decade and a half of football. And now, like you said, I kind of feel like the old head. But yeah, no, the only point I really disagree with is I feel like I've seen scoring happen a little less.
I just think that the defenses in general are just getting better. They're adapting. they're adapting to the new ways of offense because you've seen these offenses like that came out basically around like when Sean McVay got hired, Shanahan got hired. It's like these new concepts, like these new running schemes. These RPOs have been really taking a jumps for like the last like 6-7 years, and just like offenses are just getting more. Their offenses are just getting smarter, and the defenses just have to adapt. They have to find a way like to adapt. That's why the 49ers defense is still great after all these years.
I was going to say, this is possibly the third time we watched football change in our generation. We went from a ground and pound and defensive-esque. We started watching teams start go for at least a star receiver and a running back duo. Then we started seeing those number one receivers become household names, and then every team try to get a number one receiver. They realize there's not enough number one receivers to go around, and then now we're in this era. But I feel like we've seen three changes of football: a defensive-esque ground and pound, a number one receiver trying to go for 300 yards a game. Then now we're in this era where literally one of us could get signed on a Thursday night. Sunday we become a number one receiver, get cut, and then go back to our regular life. So
Yeah, it's weird how it's kind of becoming dime a dozen, but yet still a very valuable position. The biggest I want to say era change that I have noticed is receivers when they came out. Receivers and tight ends both, they sucked. They shouldn't have gotten on the field. Like Mike Evans was an anomaly when he was drafted out of Texas A&M as a rookie because he did ball out. He did start with 1,000-yard seasons. That wasn't the norm. It took a little while for receivers to really come online. And I think that now we're kind of spoiled in terms of the immediacy of it. Right here in New York, we saw Garrett Wilson immediately take off. Tony, before he was traded unceremoniously from the Giants, he had a few breakout games. He had a few impressive showings where he made Daniel Jones's offense look good. I think that that's kind of the instant impact that a solid receiver can do for you. That's all without mentioning players like Justin Jefferson, who came in and revolutionized the Vikings offense by just being there. Jamar Chase, those two LSU receivers have, I think, changed the game. I think that's when we started to see this third new era that you're talking about, Tev, with the crazy receivers that just come pro ready and come ready to embarrass grown men as defenders.
Absolutely. You mentioned the LSU boys. I'm going to mention the Alabama boys, the Devontae Smiths, the Henry Ruggs, the Jamo Williams. I mean, granted, Jamo and Henry really couldn't give us a bigger sample size due to injury and off the field problems. But when they are on the field, I mean, look at Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith is in a 1A, 1B situation. They traded for a star wide receiver, and now it's to the point where, why did we trade for him? We have one right here.
Right. We saw A.J. Brown slide to the second round. Him, DK Metcalf, and Elijah Moore all slid to the second round. But those three Ole Miss teammates, those were elite producers at the college level. And I remember seeing on the Pat McAfee show, I believe, just yesterday, McAfee bring up the importance of playing time and experience at the college level becoming more and more prevalent. And I think as the talent level grows and we see super teams form more and more in terms of joining that Alabama tier, I think that we're seeing wide receivers kind of go through the same thing where they're already going against elite competition day in and day out. And now we're seeing players like the AJ Browns, the Puka Nakuas that come out not even on the first day of the draft and still make an immediate impact to their team. It's amazing.
We're seeing a base talent level rise, and I feel like a lot of people were waiting for it, coaches. But I love it. I really do love it too.